and the last subject we have today, which is why good people do bad things and how can the ethical behavior of individuals be changed. So, and with me here for this last session in the Nordic session, I'm more than happy to present Elizabeth Wilks-Wood from Carlsberg Group, who is the Vice President for Compliance. And in this session, I will try and ask Elizabeth some questions, mainly about ethical behaviors. But first of all, a warm welcome to Elizabeth.
Hi, thank you. Hope everyone can hear me okay.
We can.
Perfect.
The first question that I like to ask you, just to start a little bit back. So what made you decide to become a barrister, and how did you end up or getting into the field of compliance, where you have been the last many years?
Sure. So those who might not know what a barrister is, you can probably hear from my accent that I'm from the UK. In the UK, there are two types of lawyers. So one is the ones that you see on the dramas. They're in the court with the white wig and the black gown with the little white hats. And that's what a barrister is. So we specialise in courtroom advocacy. I decided that I wanted to be a barrister when I was about 8 or 9 years old. And it's because I saw one on a TV drama. It was a black lady, it was a courtroom drama, she was in the outfit, and it was the coolest thing that I'd ever seen as a child. And so I decided that I wanted to be a barrister, even though I didn't quite know what one of those was. She seemed to have lots of people listening to her, and there was a good outfit. So that's why I decided to become a barrister. And why did I move into compliance? I think like lots of people, I kind of fell into compliance by accident. I'm a telecoms and a competition lawyer. And the company that I was working for at the time was subject to a competition law infringement. I was probably one of the people that complained the most about compliance because I didn't understand it. It was really bureaucratic and difficult to do. And the general counsel at the time suggested that I run it instead of complain about it. So I fell into compliance by accident.
That's a good story, and I guess also many of us can relate to that, with the compliance sometimes being a little bit of a hassle, but but in the end, I guess we just need to embrace it. But you have worked as a compliance professional in many different industries, and when you look back and across these industries, is there some what can you say, comment about the sectors in regards to what is most where with the challenges that are in these different sectors?
Sure. So when I was working in the gambling sector, so I was the head of compliance for the casino part of the Ritz Hotel. That was super hard because gambling was like another language. It has its own culture, its own terminology, and its own technology. So that was tricky. With Carlsberg, it was the first time that I'd worked in a multinational that was that big and in that many jurisdictions. But I suppose the common thing is our job is all about people, their behaviour, and trying to help make their behaviour better and to help them make ethical decisions. So even though the sectors and the industries that I've been in have been very different, those issues are common. Sometimes people just do crazy things and our job is to try to help them make better decisions, and that's been the same when I've crossed different countries and when I've crossed different sectors as well.
When you look at, because now when you have been in this field for that many years, I know this is maybe a little bit of a broad question to ask, but what would you say what are the primarily drivers when it comes to unethical decision making in organizations?
Sure. So I suppose based on my experience, when people do crazy things, it's because of it's one of three things. So sometimes it's just that they simply don't know better. They're not aware of the rules or the risks, and then they take them because they're just unaware of them. Secondly, people know exactly what they're doing, and sometimes there's a personal benefit. So maybe it benefits them financially to do something naughty, and that's why they do it. Or the third one is sometimes there can be incentives to drive a particular behaviour, which is in conflict with compliance. So I'll use an example. Let's think about somebody who's the head of procurement, for example. And one of the incentives that they have is simply to source vendors who are the very, very cheapest, the lowest cost ones that the company can get. If you can imagine the behavior that that head of procurement would do, but it would be different if perhaps their incentives were not only to source a low cost provider, but also a provider that produced the product in an ethical way. So sometimes the incentives that we apply to individuals mean that they actually are in conflict with doing the right thing. And in my experience, people will do what they're incentivized to do. Companies pay people bonuses, companies structure the way that people are paid or the recognition that they get because they're trying to drive a particular behavior. But sometimes those incentives work against compliance and can work against ethics. And often, in my experience, especially when people circumvent controls, when people know what to do, but they choose to do something different, it's because there's a conflict between the incentives. They're often incentive on what they achieve, not how they achieve it. And because of that, people sometimes end up inadvertently breaking the rules. And then often when you've broken the rules and there are no consequences, that can continue. And sometimes small non-compliance can get bigger and bigger because first time it was an accident and you got away with it. You're kind of looking over your shoulder, waiting for somebody to identify you. And then the next time you still get away with it. And then over time, you just kind of go, oh, okay, let's continue. So sometimes a small non-compliance that's not detected can end up being a very enduring non-compliance just because people are incentivized to do the wrong thing instead of the right.
I guess also when we talk about the behavior on this case, ethical behaviors, but then it's easier to talk about. I guess it's a lot harder to change. And could you maybe give us some insights in regards to what it is that you're doing in order to change these ethical behaviors or make sure that they doesn't change from the current ones, so we don't end up in a story like the one we heard before with a big froster.
Of course. So I suppose what is it that I'm trying to do? So I'm trying to do kind of three things. So firstly, I try to look at what behaviors people are trying to incentivize and to see, are we putting people in a dilemma? Is there a conflict between doing the right thing and just getting the job done? So firstly, to have a look at incentives. So I do a lot of that. But secondly, to try to have a look at the data. So when non-compliance occurs, either within my company or within another company, to try to understand what were the root causes of that. Why did that happen? Was it a people failure? Was it a process failure? Was it, I don't know, some other failure? And to try to understand what can I learn from that and what do I need to change to try to reduce the likelihood of that happening. And in particular, if I can find patterns within the data that are indicative of a risk emerging, then we try to target support and guidance and awareness where we can see those risks are increasing. So the next thing is kind of looking at the data and understanding why things go wrong. And then the third thing is, if I look back as to why I moved into compliance or why I was probably the person that complained about compliance the most in my old company, it's that sometimes compliance can itself be the barrier to doing the right thing. As a lawyer, I live in this world of lots of paper and complexity, and I'm in compliance. I tend to find that we're the people who would do the right thing no matter how difficult it was. But often the business are just trying to get through the day. They're just trying to do things as simply and efficiently as possible. And so, as an example, if it takes 4 forms to find the right form to complete, if it requires 3 people to sign it off, then it's not really a surprise that people in a hurry will just not do it. So the other thing that I try to do is to try to find friction in our processes. Are there ways that we can make it easier for people to do the right thing every day? What I love doing, is my personality type, is I love fixing processes that are broken. And when I fix a broken process, I try to figure out how can I weave compliance and ethics into it so that it's seamless. people do the right thing because it's actually really easy to do now. I use the analogy of how easy it is to order things on Amazon. They have something called one click. So I look at a book that I like, I can click it, and it's almost automatically, they take the money, they're figuring out the delivery, and I can get it delivered the next day. It's super easy for me to do it. What I try to do is to try to make compliance like that. There's one click, it's really simple, and often if I am really good, doing the right thing, doing the compliant thing is the easiest and the most simple for the business to do. They do it by default, not because they have the same kind of moral code that I do, but just because it's easy and simple for them to do, and they like things that are easy and simple. So yeah, try to do a combination of understanding why it happened, looking for it in the data, and make it super easy for people to choose to do the right thing every day.
Of course, now I need to be careful I don't put words in your mouth, but when you describe it like this, you make it sound almost easy. But I guess, but what I'm thinking, you must need a strong mandate, because I guess you work. It's not in a silo. Then you have to work across the organization, and that cannot be easy.
No, I think you're right. Having a strong mandate is really, really important. And I think the other thing is to find your advocates, to find the people who are like you. So within Carlsberg, the way that we do compliance is we have a small team of subject matter experts in Copenhagen. And in every market, we have at least one lawyer. A proportion of their time is spent doing compliance. So my job is to kind of make them look amazing. Everything that I do is to make them the very best compliance people that they can be. So we provide guidance and checklists and simple tick sheets for them to do everything that we want them to do in the right way. And they become the advocates, they become the ambassadors for compliance in their respective markets. So the only way that I figured out how to do compliance well is to have a really clear mandate from the top, and to have the support of key advocates around the business. Because, for example, we're in maybe 140 markets around the world, and I'm in Copenhagen. And if there's a risk that's emerging in Asia or China or, I don't know, another place in the world, when I've gone to bed, it's really important that the person that's in that market knows how I think, knows what risks look like, and can take the same action as if the business got me on the phone. And so what you want to do is find those people who get it and help them to be like you, help them to advocate for compliance and make their job super easy. We even, for example, have a little monthly newsletter. One of the things that we have is a compliance hero of the month. So every month we take the opportunity to kind of celebrate one of these advocates, because as a lawyer, rarely do people celebrate anything that we do. And so what we try to do is to kind of celebrate the people that support us, because that will encourage them to support us even more.
Another thing, because as we can hear, and as you also said in the introduction, you're from UK, but you have also been working in Dubai and the Caribbean, and is now sitting in Denmark. And when looking at compliance, what can I say, challenges, or how it's looked upon, can you say anything about the culture and how that may differ?
Yeah, I think culture is, for me, it's super important. So culture for me lives in the space between what we say and what we do. My shorthand for culture is it's the way that things get done. It's all the silent stuff that never gets written down, but it's the way that people behave, it's the way that people make their decisions. And I've worked in really different cultures, and I think compliance, being cognizant of those cultural differences, is really important. And so, as an example, in some of the markets that I support in Asia, there really isn't a culture of questioning your seniors. So, for example, if we're doing a speak up campaign to encourage people to blow the whistle, I need to be really careful and not say things like, even if it's your manager, feel free to tell us, because in some cultures that simply won't work. It's the truth, but I need to perhaps refine the message so that it resonates more with that culture. One of the reasons that I really love Copenhagen is that I found the Danes are super trusting, which is fabulous. But one of the things as a cynical Brit is that I kind of go, yeah, I trust people, but I also want to verify and check that they've done it. But that's not necessarily very usual for the Danes. So again, I need to find local people like the Danes to help me navigate the culture. So I suppose one of the tips is to find the people in those cultures and to use them to help you guide the way around the little cultural nuances. It's even as simple as sometimes the translation of a word that I'll use for whistleblowers. I need to make sure that I've tested that with somebody who's a native speaker, because as an example, in German, if I use one translation of the word whistleblower, it has a really negative connotation, but if I use a different word, it has a really positive one. So those advocates know the culture as well, and to use them to help you to navigate those cultural nuances, because I would never understand them. But if you speak to the people who know those cultures, they can help you to kind of just make the little adjustments to mean that you're much more powerful and you're much more influential than you would be otherwise.
Then a question more related to the tools. Of course, we're all aware of a whistleblowing solution can be one tool, but do you have other tools that you use in your work when you work with compliance?
Sure. I'm married to a software developer. I'm not as much of a geek as he is, but I'm a geek in training. So I love data. One of the ways that I try to remove friction from the business is if I can automate a compliance control, it's quite sneaky. Usually it means that it's less friction for the business. It's easier for them to do the right thing. For example, it's easier for them to do a conflict of interest disclosure using an automated tool than it is that if I send them a form in Word and they have to sign it and get their boss to sign it, etc. So where possible, I try to automate compliance controls because it gives me real-time insight about what people are doing, but more importantly, what people are not doing. So for example, if let's use an example of a gift register. I haven't automated it, it's on my list of things to do. But if you have an automated gift register, it gives you the opportunity not only to see which markets gifts are common, but also if you never see a market ever completing a gift register, that's amazing insight that you just kind of go, that's a bit unusual. Is it that they just never accept gifts, or is it that they did but something's gone wrong? So I try to think about ways to automate the things that I need people to do to reduce risk, because if I can automate compliance controls, it gives me insight about what's going on around the world, especially in places where I might not quite understand what's going on. So at the moment, I'm looking into automating things like the conflict of interest disclosure, and I'm just about to launch a new third-party screening tool as well. So yeah, increasingly trying to use automation to make it easier. So the business feels it's easier because it's a button to push. And it's great for me because it gives me real-time insight about what they're doing or what they're not doing.
Exciting. But then maybe a last question.
Sure.
What does the future holds for you, Elizabeth?
How exciting. Hopefully staying in Copenhagen because it's lovely. It's gorgeous. It's so clean. Everybody's so tall and so polite, and your English is beautiful, so that's good. Hopefully continuing to work with really amazing people on really, really challenging issues. I love a challenge. And just continuing to evolve. And for me, one of the reasons that I love compliance is, in a small way, I believe that we're trying to make the world a more ethical place. And so I genuinely love what I do, and I genuinely love trying to help people to make better ethical decisions. So as long as I can keep doing that, I'll be super happy.
I think it's some good drivers to have when you work in this this field, Elizabeth.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
You've got to take the wins where you can.
Yeah, I really enjoyed talking with you and this session, and even though I could ask a million more questions, I bet we better have to round up so people can get home from the session here.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.